All right, welcome back. No Quarter Given podcast. With no further ado, we bring in Luke Easterling, NFL Draft Analyst from Athlon Sports, a insider with the Buccaneers as well. It's covered the Buccaneers for many, many years here in the Tampa Bay area, but he also covers the NFL Draft in whole and the NFL in whole for Athlon Sports. And so we're going to talk all things Bucs draft here. Welcome in, Luke.
Hey, my pleasure, Jason. Good to be here, man.
Hey, I know you covered the Bucs for many, many years in your previous roles. Now you're obviously with Athlon, where you cover the entire league now in the draft position. But we're going to focus attention on the Buccaneers, drafted number 19th overall. They've got a total of 8 draft picks. They got a 2, 3, a 5, 3 6s, and a 7. Just give me a quick synopsis of what are your 1 or 2 big needs for the Buccaneers heading into this draft.
Yeah, I think they're pretty clear. I think obviously offensive tackle after letting go Donovan Smith. Obviously have to decide what they want to do with Tristan Wirfs, if they want to leave them on the right side or move him over to the left. And obviously that'll depend on how the draft goes. Who they draft. It's not a matter of if they draft a tackle, just when. And it depends on who that guy is. If it's a guy that's comfortable on the left side and has experience there, maybe they leave Tristan Wirfs where they know he's an all-pro on the right. And if it's somebody who's better on the right side, I think they're comfortable trying to work Tristan on the left side. So I definitely think if it's not at 19, I definitely think somewhere on day 2, whether it's in the second or third round, they've got to get a guy who they think can be a starting tackle. But other than that, they need pass rushers, man. Shaq Barrett's 30. He's coming off the torn Achilles. You never know how that's going to impact his abilities. Still waiting for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka to kind of break out, right? He was very much the same player last year that he was as a rookie. It's not really what you want to see. Bringing back Anthony Nelson was huge for the depth overall, but they just, the secondary and the pass rush go together, right? And the Bucs pass rush was just so non-existent for such a long stretch of time last season that put a lot of stress on a defensive backfield that was already kind of banged up and undermanned for a lot of the years. So, the secondary will need its help. They need a slot guy, right? They need a nickel defender. They lost Sean Murphy-Bunting.
Right.
They lost a bunch of their safeties. I like Ryan Neal, the safety they signed from Seattle. I think that was a great signing. I think he will start, but they really need that slot nickel guy. Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis, 2 of the best outside guys in the league, maybe the best tandem on the outside that there is. But that slot position is a starting position. It's so important. So I wouldn't be surprised if they target a guy specifically for that role early on. But it's tackle, it's pass rusher, and I think that nickel slot guy is where I'd put their top 3 needs right now.
Give me, being at the Bucs are at 19, give me a couple of the names of the tackle list and maybe an edge rusher or 2 that you think could be there at 19 when the Buccaneers are up.
So for tackles, it's similar to 2020, right? Where I think there's 4 tackles at the top, just like last year. The Bucs got the 4th of those tackles that year, and he ended up being the best one in Tristan Wirfs. They moved up 1 pick just to make sure they got him, because if I'm not mistaken, the Atlanta Falcons were trying to move up ahead of them at 13 to get there. That's what I had heard at the time.
Right.
And the Bucs were like, fine, take the 4th round pick. We'll jump up 1 spot and overpay basically to make sure that they got Tristan Wirfs and making sure that a division rival didn't get him. So this year, not sure if there's a Tristan Wirfs in that group. You never can really plan on that, but it's Broderick Jones from Georgia. It's Peter Skoronski from Northwestern. It's Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State, and
Darnell Wright.
Darnell Wright from Tennessee. So, which honestly, the closer we get to the draft, the more I feel like Darnell Wright might be the first of those guys off the board. I think he could go as high as number 9 to Chicago. If Chicago stays at 9, I think he'd be perfect for what they need. But getting back to the Bucs, I think if it's similar to Wirfs, right? If any of those top 4 tackles makes it to 19, I think it's a strong possibility that guy is the pick. Question is, I don't know if they make it that far. Again, that 2020 draft, the Bucs had to move up to 13 to get that top 4, the last of those top 4 guys. Feels like it might be that kind of situation this year. And look at the teams that are picking ahead of them. If there's 1 or 2 tackles left on the board, you got Washington at 16, you got Pittsburgh at 17. These teams need tackles too. So if that doesn't happen, if all those tackles are off the board, they can't move up and get their guy. I definitely think they turn their attention to pass rusher. I think they try to trade down, honestly. If one of those top tackles doesn't make it to 19 and maybe they're not, I think maybe the only other guy that you would consider is Bijan Robinson if he's there, just because he's so damn good, and regardless of what position he plays. I think that's a conversation they will have in that building if he's there on the board. But I really think
Bijan was one of the only two places he came was Tampa and Philadelphia. Yep. From the report. Yep. So he's been in the building. They've spent time with him.
Yeah, sometimes that means something. Sometimes it doesn't. But I think in this situation, I think it does. I think a guy like that making a couple visits and Tampa being only one of them, I think that says a little bit at least. But I think if those tackles are gone, I really think they'd love to move down. I think they'd love to move down. You mentioned earlier on the list, they don't have a 4th round pick. They traded it last year to get back into the 5th round to take Zion McCollum, who will fight for that nickel spot, but he's still a good bit raw. I think they still need some more depth there, but I think the move down is what they want, because I think if they do move down to the latter part of the first round, I think that's where you're going to see some of those pass rushers that I think they could get good value. Will McDonald, the 4th from Iowa State, is a guy that I think they really like a lot. And I think similar to the way they moved down or they didn't move down, but they got Joe Tryon-Shoyinka at 32 and we're expecting him to go earlier. They really liked him a lot. I think they feel similarly about Will McDonald. I don't know if they'd take him at 19, but I think they'd love to move down and maybe get him later in the first round. And I think that's where you're going to see value at the edge spot too, in the 20s and even into the second round. I think they could get way more value at 50 if they wait and get an edge guy at 50 in the second round. I think there's going to be a ton of value there. Felix Ndudike Uzama from Kansas State, BJ Ojulari from LSU, Derek Hall from Auburn, all guys that I think could be available in the 50 range if they don't go pass rusher early. But the one guy that's intriguing to me, if he happens to get there, I don't expect this. I think Nolan Smith from Georgia. I think he could go top 10. I think Atlanta likes him a lot, and he could go as high as number 8. If teams are scared off by the injury, he missed most of last season with a torn pec. If he ends up on the board at 19, that's a conversation that I think the Bucs would have because of the speed, the athleticism, the versatility. He can drop and cover and do a lot of things that I think Todd Bowles would love to have a guy like that on the edge who can do a bunch of different things. He runs so many different fronts, loves to drop guys. He'll drop Vita Vea into coverage and then blitz him from like 8 yards out. He wants to be able to interchange those guys. So Nolan Smith is an athlete that can do all of those things, right? So I think if he somehow gets to them, that's a conversation they might have at 19. I just don't see another edge rusher. Lucas Van Ness, the guy from Iowa, didn't start. He wasn't a starter at Iowa. I know he's got the physical tools, but program like Iowa, I feel like there's probably a reason you weren't in the starting lineup. That gives me a little bit of pause in terms of his projections, but I think they're really hoping there's a tackle. I think they're really hoping there's a tackle there. And if not, they would really, really love to move down, even more so, maybe even than staying and picking a guy like Robinson, who obviously is one of the best players in this draft. I think they'd love to move down, recoup a couple extra picks, especially in that 2nd, 3rd, 4th round range, and really fill their needs with value as opposed to having to reach for what you need early.
All right, I'm gonna ask one more first round question, then we'll get to the one middle round question. We'll get you out of here. Quarterback situation in the first round. If you're the Buccaneers, at what point in the first round, if one of these guys, whether it's Richardson, Levis, pick your guy, whoever your guy is, at what point in the first round does it get? Is it after Tennessee at 11, where if the quarterback is still there, then the Bucs maybe start working the phones a little bit to think, what is it going to take to get up to get the guy, especially if they like the guy?
Again, there's a different conversation for different players, right? For each guy. So obviously the buzz right now is, maybe CJ Stroud doesn't even go number 2. Maybe he's the guy that tumbles. I think that's ridiculous and bonkers from my own, evaluation process, but this is the draft. It happens every year, right? We've seen this stuff happen before.
It's probably going to be Richardson, Levis, or Hooker. Those are the 3 names
right. That feels most likely. My point is that Stroud is the guy I would go get first, if he starts to tumble, because if that guy starts to move down, he's a guy that can start now. He could beat out Baker Mayfield. He could beat out Kyle Trask. He could start week 1 and I wouldn't be surprised. So he's the guy I'd be most interested in trading up for. After that, it's Richardson. Because he's the guy that can be special. And I say that compared to the whole quarterback class. He's got the most potential upside, whatever cliche term you want to use. He's the guy that can be Mahomes, Allen. Now, again, I'm not saying he will, but if you go back to those drafts and listen to the conversations that we had about those 2 guys, very similar conversation. Otherworldly physical attributes and tools and instincts are off the charts and all these things. Accuracy, experience, starting record, all these different flaws that we're pointing out about these guys, very similar conversation we were having about Mahomes and Allen. So if you want to swing for the fences and potentially hit a grand slam or potentially strike out and crash and burn, Richardson's the guy that I would feel comfortable with making a bold move up the board. If everybody else is like, we're just not sure, he's not experienced enough, blah, blah, blah. Like you said, if he gets past 11, he's still on the board. Again, I don't see that happening. But if it does, that's when I start calling, because I'm like, you know what? Kid's got too much talent, too special, too many rare tools. I don't know that we've seen a quarterback like him ever, period. Like when you think about all the different things in the athleticism and the size and the arm strength, a little Cam Newton, kinda, a little Josh Allen, kinda, but there's some differences. And I think he's a special player. So Levis and Hooker, it's more, if they both if one of them gets to 19, you wonder, do I have to take this guy because he plays quarterback? He's that important. That's going to be the conversation at 19. I'm not moving.
There are reasons why they're dropping, especially Levis. Why is he dropping to 19?
Yeah, so if those guys get to 19, I think that's a conversation again, especially if the tackles are gone, quarterbacks are just too important. You feel like you can get an edge guy in the second. That's the conversation I would have to have at 19. Do they like Levis or Hooker enough to take them in the first round, because it's just too important if you hit on a quarterback? I could get that. I could get behind that.
Yep.
But I'm not moving up unless it's for Stroud or Richardson.
I'm with you. I agree. I totally agree. Trey Lance, rumors about Trey Lance's availability. If you're the Buccaneers, do you give up a third or fourth round pick for a guy like Trey Lance?
I mean, sure. I think you do. But I think this is one of those things that I don't know where the rumor originated. The only thing I saw was from one of those fake NFL rumors Twitter accounts that seems to be popping up nowadays, and everybody kind of shares it and acts like it's gospel, and then they write stories about the report, about the rumor, and it's just like it turns into this big thing when really it's just somebody throwing stuff against a wall.
What are your thoughts on Trey Lance?
In a vacuum, if we're talking about just the concept of if he were available, should the Bucs be interested? Absolutely. I mean, this is a guy who, again, number 3 overall pick just a couple years ago. We knew he was raw. We knew he was going to need patience and time aside from the injury, right? So, I mean, if the 49ers are silly enough to give up on that already, especially given their current situation, Garoppolo is gone.
Purdy hurt.
Purdy
recovering.
Who knows when he'll be able to throw a football again, which is horrible after the end of the season he had. He was playing so well, such a great story. And so you hope he can bounce back, but that's not a sure thing at all. So if that's the conversation, you got Sam Darnold is the most experienced quarterback on your roster right now. So if they're thinking about trading and giving up on Trey Lance at sunk cost, right, at pennies on the dollar for what they gave up 3 first-round picks,
right,
I think that's ridiculous. I think that's very, very, very bad. I don't think John Lynch will do that. I don't think Kyle Shanahan wants to do that either. If Brock Purdy is healthy, I think that's a very different conversation, because I think he was obviously going to be the starter going into this year, and he's young and he's on a super cheap contract. So then you listen. Then you're like, okay, Trey Lance is just going to sit there. Now, if we can get something significant, that's fine. But with Purdy's injury, they don't have a solution right now. So they can't afford, in my opinion, to move on from him yet. They can't afford to give up on that. If they're willing to do it, the Bucs should absolutely be on the phone and say, hey, what's it going to cost?
All right, you're listening to Luke Easterling, NFL Draft Analyst, Athlon Sports. You can find Luke on social media at Luke Easterling, Easterling. He does a great job covering the NFL. He's very dialed in with the Bucs. He has many contacts over at One Buck Place. One more question for you, middle round part. I've heard you say this. You really think this draft from round 2 to round 5 is where the strength of this draft is? You know, and this is where championship teams build their rosters, from round 2 to round 5. Depth. You find guys. Give me a couple of names. I'm gonna give you a couple positions I want to hear your thoughts on. To me, the Bucs need speed on offense, whether it's a running back, maybe a speed receiver. Give me a couple names in these middle rounds that you think the Bucs might be looking at offensively, speed wise.
Yeah, if they want to go speed, I think wide receiver. Jason Light loves his Nebraska guys, right? And there's a Nebraska guy that fits. Trey Palmer is a wide receiver from Nebraska, 4.3 speed. Decent enough size. He's over 6 foot, close to 200 pounds. Not a complete receiver yet, but he's got the speed. He's got game breaking speed that, again, they just don't have on this roster, especially after Scotty Miller is gone now. So they don't have that kind of speed. And I think Jason Light, not sure if it's early enough, like 3rd round. I think he's a 3rd round guy to me if he's still on the board there. maybe they have that conversation. Maybe they hope that he gets to the 4th if they make a trade. Again, they don't have a 4th round pick right now. So I think Trey Palmer is the receiver that I would want. He's the guy I would go after because there's some other fast guys, but they're really small. Tank Dell from Houston is like 160 pounds. I mean, that's concerning at that point. You wonder if he can hold up at the next level. And Trey Palmer's bigger and faster than that. So he's the guy that I think the Bucs would target if they're looking for a receiver in that range. Running back is interesting because you've got a couple of guys who have some speed, but I think Devon Achane from Texas A&M is probably a 2nd round guy.
Right.
I don't think they go running back that early. The couple of small guys, if they're looking for speed later.
Spears out of Tulane, the kid out of Tulane.
Yeah, well, I love Tyjae Spears. He's a top 5 back in this class to me. I don't think he gets past teams like Miami in the 2nd round, maybe even New Orleans, which I'd hate to see as a Bucs fan, obviously. But he's in Louisiana there. They know him well. Yeah. Tyjae Spears is a guy I would love to have on this team. I think he's going to be off the board way before the Bucs are thinking running back.
Gotcha.
But the one little guy to keep in mind is Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina. He's a small guy, but man, he's explosive. He's fun. I think he'd pair well. You and I kind of discussed this the other day. The Bucs have to figure out what they want that second running back to be because Rachaad White's kind of in the middle, right? He's a pretty balanced guy. He's not a super burner speed guy. But he's not a big physical run you over guy. So the Bucs have to decide: do we want the big physical, tough guy to be the number 2 back?
Roschon Johnson, a guy from Texas.
Yeah, Roschon Johnson, which I think they love Roschon Johnson. I think I would, if I had to put money on it, he's the guy that I think they would like to have, the more powerful, churn it out type of deal. And you know this too, Jason Light is willing to double dip at a position. So maybe they look at the position and they're like, we'll take both. We'll get the powerful guy and we'll get a versatile speed guy to put in that group as well and just do both. And that way we can do whatever we want. So Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina, go watch some of his tape if you haven't seen it yet. He's a fun player to watch. I know he's small, but man, when the ball in his hands, he's explosive.
All right, give me a couple of linebackers that you like. Obviously, with Devin White's trade situation, we don't know what his long-term future is with the Buccaneers. Levante David getting older. Give me a couple of linebackers that you think they could target in the middle rounds as well.
I mean, the one guy that I hope gets to them is Deion Henley from Washington State. I don't think he will. I think the NFL is smarter than that. But if he happens to get to the 3rd round, if he's there at 82, I mean, I might call the Bucs like on the phone myself and beg them to take him if he's there at 82. The last time that happened in the 3rd round with a guy I felt like that about was a guy named Chris Godwin out of Penn State, who I had like a almost 1st round grade on, and he was there in the 3rd and they took him and I was so thrilled. But Deion Henley is the number 1 linebacker in this draft to me. It's not a great draft for linebackers, but I know we got Jack Campbell from Iowa. We got Trenton Simpson from Clemson, Drew Sanders from Arkansas. I have Henley above all those guys. I think he is a great athlete. I think he's got such great instincts when it comes to making plays on the ball. He can cover. And again, what's the big struggle has been for Devin White? Consistency in coverage in space and not getting lost in those assignments. Deion Henley is a converted wide receiver from Nevada. He transferred from Nevada to Washington State, and he looks like it when the ball gets near him. He's so comfortable in coverage. And then a couple other guys, good athletes if they want to wait till day 3. Owen Papo from Auburn is a guy that is 4.4 speed. He's big enough, great range, again, athleticism, and they've done this before. They got KJ Britt from Auburn. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean are both from Auburn. Jason Light loves drafting guys from the War Eagle Nation there. So
special team guy can be a special teamer.
Yeah, exactly. Immediately a special teams guy, but with that speed and that athleticism could definitely develop into something more than that. Cam Jones from Indiana is another guy that I think they like. A lot of interesting depth in the linebacker class. There's just not that blue chip guy at the top. So man, if they could get a guy like Henley on day 2, I'd love it. If they wait till day 3, Owen Papo, Cam Jones, those guys are names to keep an eye on.
Well, awesome insight, Luke Easterling. Check out all his great work. Go to athlonsports.com. He's wearing you can watch this video on the Jason Powers YouTube channel. He's wearing his cool old school Devil Ray shirt, which I like. And I know he is a huge you're going to see him all over social media throughout the week. I heard him on Sirius XM with JT the Brick last week. He's going to be all over the place this week, giving great insight on the NFL draft. And you are hearing him right here on the No Quarter Given podcast. Really appreciate your time, Luke.
Hey, my pleasure, Jason. Have a great week, man.
Appreciate it. And we'll be right back with Peter and I talking about favorite and least favorite moments in the Bucs draft history. We'll be right back.